Erev Tov, everyone! It is Monday night. It is 8 p.m. here on the east side of the United States, here in the diaspora. This is the Maimon Beit Knesset, therefore it must be Zeyde Story Corner. Of course, you knew that. Okay, so we are going to tell a new story tonight. This story is called The Outcast Prince. And again, this is a little longer story, so we shall see if we are going to do another one tonight or not. So stay tuned. We shall see. Okay, let us begin. There lived a king who had an only son, on whom he doted. No one, not even his oldest tutor, was permitted to utter a word of correction to the prince whenever he did anything wrong. And so, as you might imagine, he grew up completely spoiled. He had many faults, but the worst feature of his character were that he was proud, arrogant, and cruel. Naturally, too, he was selfish and disobedient. When he was called to his lessons, he refused, saying, "I am a prince. Before many years I shall be your king. I have no need to learn what common people must know. Enough for me that I shall occupy the throne and shall rule. My will alone shall prevail. Say not the law of the land. The king can do no wrong." Well, handsome and haughty, even as a youth, he made the king's subjects fear him by his imperious manner. His appearance in the streets was the signal for everyone to run into his house, bar the doors, and peer nervously through the casements. He was a reckless rider, and woe betide the unfortunate person who happened to be in his way, sparing neither man, woman, nor child. He callously rode over them, or lashed them out of vindictivity with the long whip he always carried, laughing when anyone screamed in pain. So outrageous did his public conduct become that the people determined to suffer in silence no longer. They denounced the prince in public. They petitioned the king himself to restrain his son, and his majesty could not disregard their complaints. At first, he was merely annoyed. Then he was indignant. But when he saw that people were thoroughly aroused and threatened to revolt, he deemed it wise to inquire into the charges against his son. And I forgot to mention the people that are in the chat room. Okay, so we do that now. We have Regina. We have Marshall, of course, the sergeant at arms. And we have Adrian Morgan, our dear friend. Good to have you. And, of course, those people who are watching in the background who don't particularly want to be into the chat room. Maybe someday. Okay, so let's get back to the story. So, a commission of 3 judges was appointed to investigate. They made fullest inquiry and finally laid a document before the king summarizing what they did not hesitate to declare the infamous actions of His Royal Highness the Crown Prince. The king's sense of justice and righteousness at once overcame his foolish pride. My people stand justified in their attitude, which at first I thought only disrespectful to my royal person, he said. I owe them an apology and recompense. I shall atone, and my son shall atone too. He shall not escape punishment. Oh, I see Simcha and Yehuda and Ronald have joined us. So anyway, the king summoned his son to appear before him, and the prince entered the royal chamber with an air of a braggart, smiling contemptuously at the learned judges who were seated to right and left of his majesty, and defiantly cracking his whip. Knowest thou why thou hast been bidden to stand before the judges of the land? Asked the king. I know not, and I care not, was the haughty answer. The foolish chatter of the mob interests me not. The king frowned. He had not seen the prince behave in this fashion before. In the presence of his father yet, he had always been respectful. Thou hast disgraced thy honored name and thy mother's sacred memory, foolish prince, exclaimed the monarch angrily. Thou hast humiliated thyself and me before the people. Still, the prince tried to laugh off the matter as a joke, but he quickly discovered that the king was in no mood for trifling. Standing grave and erect, his majesty pronounced sentence in a loud, firm voice. "Know, all men," he said, while the judges, counselors, officers of state, and representatives of the people stood awed to silence, that it having been proven on indisputable evidence that the prince, my son, hath grievously transgressed against the righteous laws of this land and against the people, my subjects, on whom he hath heaped insult, I have taken counsel with my advisers, the ministers of state, and it is my royal will and pleasure to pronounce sentence. Therefore, I declare that my son, the prince, shall be cast forth into the world, penniless, and shall not return until he shall have learned to count to 5. And be it further known that none may minister unto his wants should he crave assistance by declaring he is my son the prince. Wow, that is harsh, huh? The prince stood astounded. What did the mysterious sentence mean? None could tell him. The only answer to his inquiries was a shrug of the shoulders, for nobody would speak to him. In the dead of night, with only the stars gazing down on the strange scene, the prince, clad in the cast-off garments of a common laborer, with his golden curls cut off, and not a solitary coin in his pocket, was conducted outside the palace grounds and left alone on the road. He was much too dazed to weep. He told himself that this was some horrible dream from which he would awaken in the morning to find himself in his own beautiful room, lying on his gilded bed under the richly embroidered silken coverlet. Yet, when dawn broke, however, he found himself hungry, tired, and his body painfully stiff under a hedge. He knew now it was no dream, but was reality. He was alone and friendless, with no means of earning his food. He understood then what hardships the poor were compelled to undergo, and he began to realize how he had made them suffer, and how, in turn, he was now to pay a heavy price for his brutal treatment of the people. All that day he wandered aimlessly until, footsore and exhausted, he sank down at the door of a wayside cottage and begged for food and shelter. These were given to him, and next day he was set to work in the fields. But his hands were not used to labor, and he was sent adrift, his fellow workers jeering at him. With a heavy heart and his pride humbled, he set forth again to learn the mystery of how to count 5. Long days and endless nights, through the heat of the summer, through the snows of the winter, the autumnal rains and the cold blasts of early spring, he wandered. A whole year passed away, and he learned nothing. In truth, he had almost forgotten why he was aimlessly drifting from place to place, farther and farther from his home. Hunger and thirst were more often than not his daily portion, and the cold earth by night was frequently his couch. Time seemed to drag along without meaning, and ofttimes for a week he heard not the sound of a human voice. He was a beggar, generally accepting gratefully what was given to him, sometimes with harsh words, often with kindly expressions. When he could, he worked, doing anything for small coins. For a rabbi who had taken compassion on him, he said, "Do any honest work, however repugnant it may first seem, rather than say haughtily, 'I am the son of a rich father.'" For a moment, he wondered whether the rabbi had guessed his secret, but the learned man said to him that he was repeating a maxim from the Talmud. Exactly a year from the date of his sentence, as well as he could keep count, the prince found himself in a strange land on the outskirts of a great city. There he fell in with a beggar who hailed him as a brother. "Come with me," said the beggar. "I know the lore of our fraternity as few do. I know where to obtain the best food and shelter for naught. Here, in this city, a beautiful and noble princess has established a place where all wayfarers may rest and refresh. None are turned away. I will take you thither." The beggar was as good as his word, and the prince enjoyed the best meal and the most comfortable shelter since he had been an outcast. Overcome with emotion at the thoughts which were conjured up, he retired into a corner and wept. Suddenly, he heard a voice of entrancing sweetness say, "Why do you weep?" He looked up and beheld the most beautiful woman his eyes had ever seen. Instinctively he rose and bowed low, but made no answer. "The princess speaks. It is your duty to answer," said another voice, that of an attendant. "A princess, of course. None but a princess could be so fair. And what a sympathetic voice she possessed." As a prince, he remembered he had spoken harshly as a ruler and had never visited any of the charitable institutions. "You must have a history," said the princess kindly. "Tell it to me. If it is to be kept a secret, you may place confidence in me. I shall not betray you." The prince was on the point of telling her everything, but he hesitated and said, "Alas, I am unhappy, a wandering beggar, as you see, O most gracious princess. But pity me not, for I am not worthy of your kind thoughts. A year ago I dwelt in a beautiful house. I was the only son of a rich merchant, and my father lavished all his love and wealth on me. But I was wicked. I was unkind to people, and I was cast forth and ordered not to return until I had learned to count 5. I have not yet learned. I am doomed to a wretched life. That is the whole of my history." "Strange," murmured the princess. "I will help thee if I can." Next day she came again to the shelter, and with her was the rabbi who had given the prince good counsel. The rabbi made no sign that he had seen the stranger before. "This sage of the Jews is a wise man and will teach thee," said the princess, and at her bidding the prince repeated what he had said the previous night. "It is a simple lesson," said the rabbi, "so absurdly simple, unfortunately, that proud people oftentimes overlook it. Tell me, my son," he added, "thou hast experienced hunger?" "I have," returned the prince sadly. "Then canst thou count 1? Dost thou know what it is to feel cold?" "I do." 2 canst thou count? "Tell me, further, dost thou know what kindness of heart is?" "That have I received from the poorest and also from the gracious princess." "Thou hast proceeded fair in thy lessons," said the rabbi. "Thou canst now count 3. Hast thou ever felt gratitude?" "Indeed I have, often during the past year, and now most particularly." 4 is now the toll of thy count," said the rabbi. Tell me, my son, hast thou learned the greatest lesson of all? Dost thou feel humble in spirit?" With tears in his eyes, the prince answered, "I do most sincerely." "Then hast thou truly learned to count 5. Return to thy father. He must be a wise and just man to impose on thee this lesson. He will assuredly forgive thee. Go with my blessing," said the rabbi, raising his hands above the young man's head and to utter a benediction. "Take also my good wishes," said the princess, and she offered him her hand to kiss. "Gracious princess," he said, "it is not meet for a beggar in rags should speak what is in his heart. But I shall return, and if thou deemest me worthy, perchance thou wilt grant a request that I shall make." "Perchance," replied the princess with a laugh. The prince made haste to return to his father's palace and relate all of his adventures. The old man listened quietly, then he clasped his son in his arms, forgave him, and proudly proclaimed him prince before all the people again. He was a changed man, and never more guilty of a cruel action. Before many months had passed, he returned to the city where he had seen the princess, with a long retinue of attendants, all bearing presents. "Gracious princess," he said, when he had been granted an audience, "I said I would return." "Indeed, I know thee not." The prince told her of their former meeting, and she seemed highly pleased. "Now," he said, "put the crown on thy work which restored me the manhood I had foolishly cast away by my conduct. I would make thee my bride, and with thee ever my guide and counselor. I shall be the most faithful of kings, and thou a queen of goodness and beauty and wisdom such as the world had not seen." The princess did not give her answer immediately, but in due course she did, and once again the prince returned home, this time happier than ever. Sitting by his side in the chariot of state was the princess, radiant in smiles, for the people welcomed her heartily, strewing flowers in her path, and ever afterward there was happiness throughout the land. Well, that was a cute story, huh? Okay, so we are at our halfway point. Well, pretty much at our halfway point. So we are going to take our break, and when we return, we shall go on to our next story. So please, everyone, stay tuned, and we'll be back in 6.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Delicious things to eat.
The popcorn can't be beat. The sparkling drinks are just dandy. The chocolate bars and the candy. So let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
It's intermission time, folks, so hurry, hurry, hurry. Step right over to our refreshment center for the most extravagant array of refreshment goodies ever assembled under one roof. Enjoy breathtaking, mouth-watering goodies, everything from a snack to a delicious full meal. At our refreshment center, you'll find a large variety of goodies to satisfy your hunger, your thirst, or your sweet tooth. So hurry, hurry, hurry. Visit our refreshment center now. The show starts in 5 minutes. The show starts in 4 minutes. The show starts in 3 minutes. The show starts in 2 minutes. The show starts in 1 minute. And now, on with the show.
And we are back. So I noticed as we were telling the story, I was kind of drifting off to the edge of the scene and almost off of the camera completely. So anyway, we do better this time. Okay. So we're going to go on with our next story, which is, this is actually a pretty good one. I think you might like this one. It's called The Story of Bostani. And this is actually a kind of a fairy tale about a person who actually did live. So anyway, let us go on. In the days of long ago, here we go again with the days of long ago again, okay, or in a land far away, or whatever. So, okay, anyway, in this story, in the days of long ago, when Persia was a famous and beautiful land with innumerable rose gardens that perfumed the whole country and gorgeous palaces. There lived a king named Hormuz. He was a cruel monarch, this Shah of Persia. He tyrannized over all his people and never allowed them to live in peace. Above all, he hated the Jews. These descendants of Abraham, he said to his grand vizier, never know when they are beaten. Yeah, that's true, huh? How many times it has been reported to me that they have been wiped out of existence or driven from the land, I know not. Yet, nothing, it seems, can crush their spirit. Tell me why this is. It is because they have a firm faith in their future, answered the vizier. What do you mean by these words? Demanded the king angrily. I speak only of what I have heard from their wise men, the vizier replied hastily. They hold the belief that they will be restored as a united people to their own land. Under their own king, interrupted Hormuz. Under a descendant of the royal house of David, the vizier answered solemnly. The king stamped his foot with rage. How dare they think of any other Shah but me, he exclaimed, for his one idea of ruling over people was that he had every right to be cruel to them. Then he said suddenly, think you that if there were no more people who could trace their ancestry to this David, their faith would be shattered? Maybe so. It shall be so, cried the king. There shall be no remnant of the house of David. He summoned his executioners, and when they were lined up before him, he surveyed the evil-looking band with a cunning gleam in his eye. Unto you, he said in a raspy voice, I hand over all the descendants of the house of David to be found among the Jews in the whole of the realm of Persia. Slay them instantly. See to it that not a single one, man, woman, or child, is left alive. Woe betide you and my counselors, this with a meaningful glance at the grand vizier, if my commands are not carried out to the letter. To your duties. Ye are dismissed from the presence. Waving them away, he indulged his fantasy in thoughts of the coming execution, chuckling all the while. From day to day, he received reports that his commands were being carried out. The land was full of weeping for the cruel butchery that was worse than war. None could defend themselves. Mere suspicion was enough for the executioners. They wasted no time with doubts, but slew all who were said to belong to the house of David. The Shah looked over the list each night and chuckled. At last he was informed that all had been slaughtered. "'Tis well, 'tis well," he said, rubbing his hands gleefully. "I shall sleep in peace tonight." He slept in a bower in a rose garden, and nowhere in the world are the roses so magnificent and so sweet-scented as in Persia. "I shall have pleasant dreams," he muttered, but instead he had a nightmare that frightened him terribly. He dreamed that he was walking in his rose garden, but instead of deriving pleasure from all the beautiful trees, he was only angered. "Are there no white or yellow or pink roses?" he asked, but received no answer. "All deep, deep, deep red," he muttered in his troubled manner. "Tell me," he demanded fiercely, stopping before a heavily laden with flowers, "why are you so red today?" And the roses spoke and replied, "Because of the innocent blood that has been shed. It is royal blood that has drenched the ground, and none but crimson roses shall bloom this year in Persia." "Bah!" screamed the enraged Shah, and drawing his scimitar, he began hacking right and left among the flowers. The beautiful blooms fell to the ground in great showers until the garden was so littered with red petals that it seemed flooded with a pool of blood. At last, only one tree remained, and as the Shah raised his sword to cut it down, an old man stepped from behind it and confronted the king. "Who art thou, and whence camest thou?" the monarch asked fiercely. No answer did the old man make. Gazing sternly into the eyes of the Shah, he raised his hand suddenly and unexpectedly and struck the king such a violent blow that he fell sprawling to the ground. He lay half stunned among the red petals, looking up at the old man. "Art thou not satisfied with the destruction that thou hast wrought?" the old man asked. "Must thou take the life of the last rose tree?" The old man stooped and picked up the scimitar which had fallen from the king's grasp. "No, no!" screamed Tammuz, fearing that he was about to be slain. He scrambled to his knees and with his clasped hands pleaded to the old man. "Take not my life," he begged. "Spare me, and I shall spare the last tree and cherish it tenderly." "So be it," said the old man, holding the sword above his head. It dropped to the ground, and looking up, Hormuz saw that the stranger had vanished. The Shah awoke, his body trembling with fear. His head was racked by a burning pain. He looked around shudderingly to see if the angry old man still stood above him with the threatening sword. Then he sent for his wizards. "Expound to me my horrible dream," he said. Their interpretations, however, did not please him. "Ye are fools," he cried. "Make search and find me a man of wisdom who understands these mysteries. Seek a sage among the Jews." The royal servants hastened to do the king's bidding. Full well they knew that when Hormuz was in a rage, lives were quickly forfeit. They seized an aged rabbi of the city and brought him before the Shah. "Canst thou interpret dreams?" asked the king abruptly, dispensing with the usual formalities. "I can explain the meaning of certain things," returned the rabbi. "Then fail not to unravel the mystery of my dreams," said Hormuz, and he related it. "The secret I must know," he concluded, "or—" But he stopped. He was afraid to add the usual threat of death that morning. "'Tis a simple dream," said the rabbi slowly. "The things of which men, and even kings, are but men, dream in their sleep, are connected with the deeds performed by day. Thy garden represents the house of David, which thou hast sought to destroy. The old man was King David himself, and thou hast promised to cherish and nurture his one remaining descendant." The Shah listened in silence. Then, with a flash in his eyes, he said, "But all the descendants of King David are slain." "All but one," said the rabbi. "There is a boy baby born on the day that the execution ceased." "Where is he?" asked Hormuz. "Your vow," the rabbi began nervously, for he did not wish to hand over the child to death. "My promise shall be faithfully carried out," interrupted the monarch. "The boy is in my house," said the rabbi. "His mother, who escaped the massacre, died when he was born." "Bring him to me," commanded Hormuz. "Fear not." From his finger he drew a ring and handed to the learned man. "This is my bond," he said. "The possession of this ensures thy safety." The child was brought to the palace, and the Shah looked at him with intense gaze. "He shall be brought up as a prince," said the king. "Servants, attendants, and slaves shall he have in great number to minister unto all his needs. He shall be treated with the utmost kindness. And because of my dream in the garden, I name him Bostani." The Shah did this because Bostani is the Persian word for rose garden. He touched the child with his jeweled scepter, and all present bowed low before the babe and showed him the respect and devotion due to a prince. Hormuz, however, was too cruel to be quite satisfied. He feared to harm the boy, but he wanted some proof that Bostani was really a descendant of King David. The child grew up into a handsome, clever youth, and Hormuz, partly out of fear, but partly because he had really grown to love the boy, kept him constantly by his side. One day, while sitting in the bower in the garden, he watched the boy among the roses. The day was hot, and a drowsiness came over the king. He had not slept in that bower since the night of his fateful dream, and he was not happy about doing so now. But he did not lack courage, and he called the boy to him. Bostani, he said, stand guard by the door, and move not while I sleep. Hormuz slept soundly and peacefully for some time, and when he awoke, he saw the lad standing motionless where he had placed himself. Bostani, he called. When the boy turned, he was startled to see blood trickling from a wound on his face. What is that? He asked anxiously. The sting of a wasp, Bostani replied. Is it not painful? For answer, the boy only smiled. How did it happen? Asked the king. The wasp stung me while I stood guard. But couldst thou not brush it away? No, replied the boy proudly. King David was my ancestor, and in the presence of a king I must stand motionless until bidden to make any movement. Then, before the king could catch him, he swooned from loss of blood and fell to the ground. He soon recovered. However, the Shah's doubts were set at rest. I know now that thou art truly of the house of David, he said, for none other could have shown such fortitude. Bostani became the Shah's favorite, and when he grew up, he was made the ruler of a province, which is actually true. He lived happily, and through him the Jews of the land also lived in prosperity and peace. And there you have it. This is the second story tonight, and the next story is too long to finish tonight, so I see Dark Night. That must be my little buddy, huh? Okay. So anyway, I want to thank you all for being here this evening. Don't forget, tomorrow night is the Rabbis Discuss, and it's going to be special because we're going to see the whole history of Israel from ancient times to the present in maps. I don't think that's been done before. So, you should be here so that you can learn about this. And then Wednesday night is the Torah study with Rabbi A and Rabbi Ansel. Friday night is Kabbalat and Ma'ariv Shabbat service at 8 p.m. Eastern, all 8 p.m. Eastern, except for Shabbat morning, which is 10 a.m. Eastern for Shacharit and Musaf. And then right back here on Monday for more stories from yours truly. Until then, we will simply say, Laila Tov.